And welcome back to another episode of the City Night Lights, brought to you by the Idiots Podcast Network. You know, it's been a long time, but we're back in action, baby, so we're excited to get right into it. So, I'm idiot number 0. My name's Zach. You know the drill. I got idiot number 1 on my left. His name's Kyle. Kyle, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Zach. How are you doing?
Life is good, but, you know, the Mets are not so good. So, you know, we're here today to talk about the Mets and the Yankees. You know, we got mid in the Yankees and even worse in the Mets. I mean, two kind of very, very disappointing teams this season. So, look, we'll just get right into it. We're going to start talking about the Mets first. And really, this has been an unbelievably underwhelming season for a team that had such high expectations going into this year. I mean, every player seems to be underperforming, and that includes guys like Francisco Lindor. Now, granted, WAR numbers may say otherwise, but if you watch him, he currently has a very hard time hitting the baseball without runners on second or third base in scoring position. He really has a hard time doing much of that, which has been driving me crazy for a guy we're paying $300-something million over the next 10 years. But I do hope that he's going to get a little better as the season progresses. Hopefully he can pick that average up and actually be a viable player day in, day out. Now, we see Nimmo. He's been playing pretty decently. Pete, when he's in the lineup, has been good. You know, he had a short-term injury with that wrist after getting hit by a pitch. But outside of those guys, and even Tommy Pham I'll throw in here. Tommy Pham, as of late, has been a really big piece for us in the lineup. But outside of that, the Mets have had just a very, very hard time producing any runs. They for some reason feel like every time we pitch, we can't hit, and every time we hit, we can't pitch. It's a weird conundrum that we somehow can't get out of. And, you know, guys like Mark Canha, Brett Beatty, even guys like Jeff McNeil have not been stepping up to the plate this year to really, you know, help the Mets out in places they really need to help out in. I mean, they're just not hitting. And, you know, and there's more than just that. We also have seen it with Scherzer. Scherzer's constant blow up, and then the next game he'll play well, and then even Verlander. It's taken Verlander a good couple starts to even look like any type of Verlander we've ever seen before. And this is probably the worst version of Verlander we've seen in a long time. So the Mets are killing me. They're absolutely killing me, Kyle.
And if I was a Mets fan, they would be killing me too. And I think going into the season, Steve Cohen had a really good idea. And his idea was to build the team around pitching, because defense wins championships in any sport you play. And he wasn't going to spend the money on the hitters. He spent the money on Lindor, and he signed Jeff McNeil to a long-term contract.
Which was fairly cheap, I may add.
It was fairly cheap.
For a player like
Correct.
Jeff McNeil, I actually think that was a good deal.
I think the thinking behind Cohen was he was going to bring up all the young guys, Alvarez, Beatty, Vientos. All those guys were going to be brought up. And he did bring up 2 of the guys.
No, he brought up Vientos too, but Vientos has been literally dog shit.
Yeah, he's been up and down too, I'm almost positive. But he has the pitching down. The starting pitching down he's got his top 3, and that's all you need in the playoffs is a top 3. I think the problem is he's got to start shedding this dead weight of the older guys and start bringing up the younger guys in the minors for this season, because it's looking like a lost season.
Don't get me wrong, I agree on that front. Guys like Ronnie Mercutio and even, you know, Kevin Parada, one of the younger catchers we just drafted, I believe, 2 years ago. I mean, these are guys that, you know, they may seem a little raw. Even guys like Jet Williams, you know, another player for the Mets, what's it called, shortstop infielder. You know, just anyone to see if they can even hit at the major league level would be nice to see, just because the Mets have struggled mightily getting guys on base. I mean, for some reason, this is like the first year where we're the inverse Mets. Instead of being able to get guys on base and not get them home, we just can't get guys on base, but when we do, we somehow get them home. I don't understand it. We literally became the inverse of the Mets. It's like, it's unfucking believable. But I do agree. I think it might be wise at this point, or maybe within the next 30 games, depending on, you know, if we keep at the pace we're at with the amount of losing we've been doing, I think bringing up some of the other younger guys who you really don't expect to see might be something interesting for the Mets to do.
And, yeah, going off of that, so we're basically putting the GM on the hot seat here.
If Billy Epler is not on the hot seat, then I don't know who is, because granted, he did make a lot of moves this offseason, but none of them feel like they're panning out. Everyone feel like they regressed back to the mean. They're not these all-star players. I mean, especially in guys like Jeff McNeil, you know, a guy who's been a career 300 hitter. He's only hitting in the mid-260s, and it's hard to do anything with that. He hasn't been the player he's been in the past. So, look, it's tough. It's tough to it's hard to blame any one individual for the Mets as an organization just failing across the board. But I guess if it had to be anybody, it would be Billy Epler, the GM. I feel like it has to be.
No, 100%, definitely Billy. But I hate to do this and put Buck on the hot seat, but I think Buck needs to be on the hot seat for one main reason, and that reason is he has an old way of thinking, and it's not working in the MLB anymore.
And his bullpen management has been god awful. Now, this has been a problem for him in the past, but his bullpen management has been beyond bad. We somehow find a way to lose. Like, that's where we've lost the most games this year, is in the bullpen. Because the second one of our starters comes out, even if they had an okay game, we're normally still in it. But then you bring in guys like Dominic Leone and Jacob Yacobonis and even Jeff Brigham. And these guys fucking suck. They suck. They don't pitch well at any point. And people are like, oh, Dominic Leone, he has a bunch of good starts, but no runs let up. Yeah, well, guess what? Then you put in a guy like fucking Jeff Brigham. It's like you had Dominic Leone in for the last 3 innings. It's ridiculous. For some reason, we have a bunch of washed-up scrubs in the bullpen like if they've never pitched on the MLB stage before. It's actually crazy.
Yeah, your bullpen management has been horrible, but I think the lineup, and that's what I was trying to get at, the lineup has been so bad that the Mets, with this big payroll, are last in the league in scoring runs in the first inning. Now, obviously, that's a problem with setting your lineup at the top. You have Buck has a theory of just have the older guys that have the biggest contracts at the top of your lineup. And obviously, any other person with common sense would see that's not working for the Mets. You have to change it up. You have to tell Lindor that he's going to bat back in the lineup, even though he's making all that money, because he's just not hitting at the level to be in the top 3 of the order consistently every single game.
I very much agree with that statement. Very much agree. Lindor needs to go back to be batting at like 6. Because it's ridiculous having him in the 2-hole where he's just not hitting. The only time he gets hits is when runners are on base, and half the time, he's not even hitting with runners on base. That's how for crying out loud, him and Pete both have 55 RBIs. Pete's played, I think, about 10 less games. But I think it's crazy that we've let this guy who's had such a struggle at the plate this year on really both sides of the plate. I mean, he's been a much better righty than a lefty, but I'm just surprised that there's been no movement with him. They really haven't done anything with Marte, even though Marte's had several struggles. And so it's been very weird. It's been very up and down.
So what I have to say is, when you said before that Lindor, even though the WAR was good, he's not been performing up to standards by the eye test, I think that even with this WAR, he is needed for the money. And I know a lot of Mets fans will hate to hear this, but I think that contract was needed for Lindor. He's got the leadership abilities on the team. Every single time he bats in front of Alonso, he goes and talks to Alonso before Alonso hits and tells Alonso exactly what he saw. And that helped Alonso become this great hitter that we now see. He's needed on the team, but you also need a manager who has the balls to tell Lindor that you're going to bat 6th or 9th in the lineup every day because you're not hitting. You're fielding, you're base running, but you're not hitting. You cannot bat in the top 3. And you need to find a manager that can tell Lindor that.
No, I very much agree, and I'm surprised we haven't seen, even an attempt to put Tommy Pham up in the top of the lineup, a guy who's been producing for us over the last month and a half, probably one of our best hitters on the team, which I never thought I'd even say. It's been shocking, but I think one of my other issues with Buck, and I've seen it a lot with the Mets, you see it especially in between innings when they actually have the camera over there, is when you look at the dugout, I feel like you'll often see the Mets just unenthused, not having fun, they look dead. They all look dead. They don't look like they want to be there. And you know what? The fact that Buck has always been a seemingly soft-spoken guy, but he doesn't light a fire underneath anybody's ass. He's just very content with the way the team is, and he's not, at least, like with the eye test, it doesn't seem like he's really doing anything to support these players and really get them going and motivate them. So I think that's been another huge issue.
And I think a big reason why they're looking so dead in the dugout is because if you're not scoring runs in the first inning, the Mets have been down early in these games almost every single game this year. That is the feeding on a clubhouse. Now, they have most of these wins because they're able to come back. They're good players. But you cannot win games consistently and have the right mindset when you're losing every single game within the first 2 innings.
Yeah, no, you're right. And something else I've noticed, and it comes back to the bullpen, a lot of, if we end up winning, outside of like the 5th, 6th inning, let's say we're up like 2-0, and this happened a couple times over this past week against San Francisco and then prior against Atlanta, we'll be up 2-0 in a game, and then, or even against Philadelphia this happened, we'll be up 2-0, 3-0. Hell, even against Philly, we were up I believe it was 8-4, and then all of a sudden we somehow open the door and let them back in every freaking time. And it's not even because we're letting them be better than us. We're just consistently making mistakes the second we get an opportunity with a win in the window.
So even if you want to go back to Billy now, the GM, you have to have common baseball knowledge to know that the older pitchers need more time to warm up. They're usually better later in the game once their arms get up to speed. Scherzer and Verlander, from the games that I have watched this year, they have gotten off to really bad starts, but they've always finished the game strong. Later innings, they're lights out. They're giving up runs early, and the Mets aren't scoring runs early. That's a combination that you cannot have, and something has to change, and I don't think it's Verlander or Scherzer, because they're still only letting up 2 to 4 runs a game, which is winnable baseball. But if you're not scoring early, it really takes a mental toll on your team.
No, I very much agree. And now, something I did want to say, because I think we're going to do this a little bit later in the show too, is that, a lot of the Mets lineup this year is going to look very similar to what it's going to look like next year. Alvarez is still going to be our catcher. Alonso's still going to be our first baseman. Freaking McNeil and Lindor are staying our middle infielders. Nimmo isn't going anywhere from center field. And Marte probably isn't moving out of the outfield anytime soon. So between DH, left field, because Tommy Pham's going to be a free agent, as well as Mark Canha, and that's really all we have in that lineup that's going to change. Maybe we see something happen with Beatty at third, because he's been very very down as of late as a hitter. I'm just intrigued to see how this lineup's going to change next year, because there's not a lot that's going to change. They really only have 3 real positions to 2 real positions that they're going to even see replacements at. So I don't know if it's – I have a feeling that this is more on the pitching staff than anything else, because this lineup is going to stay this lineup for the next couple of years. It's not going to change for the most part. That's just the way it is, based on contracts, based on money. That's the way it's going to be. So I'm very intrigued to see what they do with this offseason, because they're going to have to, I think, get a little bit more creative. Maybe they look for a guy that the Mets have always needed, and I'm really disappointed they've never looked for this prototype. Not a Austin Meadows. He now Hunter Renfroe. We've needed a Hunter Renfroe type player on the Mets for a very long time. A guy who might only hit 250, but he can hit 30, 40 home runs in a season, get you 80, 90 RBIs. We've needed a guy that can bat a little bit later in the lineup and really be like another cleanup hitter. We just haven't had that opportunity, so I'm hoping they look that way, whether they go somewhere good for DH or they put a lot of money into the outfield again. I'd be very intrigued to see how that shakes out.
And I agree with that. I think Alvarez, obviously, definitely staying. Very cheap deal. You get him for
cheap.
Practically free. Not that money matters with the Mets, but Alonso, he's staying. He's going to get his money. Lindor is going to stay at short. I got definitely Pham in left, and I got Nimmo definitely in center. I think that since this season is a wash, you don't make these trade deadline moves that you would make in other seasons. You let this one ride out. You keep your prospects. You don't go all in for this year. I say McNeil right now is underperforming. He's not batting the 280 to 300 that he normally bats. That's a problem, because he's not a home run hitter. He's a good defender, but he's not the fastest guy either.
He's an on-base guy. That's all he's been.
And
that's what he does at the plate.
Under 270, then that's a problem. I say you give McNeil the season, but since this is Steve Cohen baseball, and this is the only team we can talk about in this fashion, Steve Cohen can dump McNeil's contract and eat part of it and not care at all. So that may be something that has to happen. I think Batty, obviously he's not playing his best baseball, but he's a rookie. It's the same thing with Volpe. You got to give him time. Volpe now has took his average from 194 to 220 in the past 2 weeks. You just got to give Batty time. I think at the end of this year you can reevaluate him, and I think Hunter Renfroe is spot on. You need that power guy. Because looking at this lineup, Alvarez is going to turn into that back-end cleanup hitter that you're looking for.
Exactly. That's what we need him to turn into. Because if he doesn't, it's going to be a little interesting. Granted, he's definitely not getting out of the lineup unless Kevin Parada somehow ends up being the best catcher in the world that we've ever seen in AA, AAA, single A. So that'll be interesting.
And Alonso's obviously your 4-hitter. Lindor is supposed to be that second power guy, but as we discussed, even if he's not hitting up the standards, he can still be a good back of the lineup guy, and he's the leader you need, he's the fielder you need, and he's good at base running.
Yeah.
He does everything else. He's got to stay. Tommy Pham's not your power guy, and Nimmo is your perfect leadoff batter. So you need that other Hunter Renfroe to bat 6th, 7th in the lineup and get you some extra power, and I definitely agree with you there.
Yeah, now, I would not be shocked if the Mets do sell a little bit. at the deadline. Guys like Canna, who they know they're not going to bring back, who might be useful for another team. We already saw that with Eduardo Escobar, a guy that we weren't bringing back regardless at the end of the season. So we got 2 bullpen arms for them, for him, just 2 minor league guys. Hopefully that pans out a little bit, but it's going to be interesting.
I agree. Canna, Marte, you already ditched Escobar.
And I hate to even say this, but I think they're going to sell Robinson at the deadline. I think David Robertson is gone at the deadline for the Mets. I think they really do need something, and maybe they look to sell Ottavino as well. But I think this season, really, with the way it's been going, I think it's a wash at this point. I could see them selling a couple of the older vets. Maybe they go back at Robertson over free agency, but I don't think they're going to keep some of these older guys with the 1-year deals. I think they're better off just selling and hopefully picking up something.
Yeah, but you need Robertson for the bullpen. You have what's your bullpen looking like? It's
outside
Robertson.
of Ottavino and Robertson.
No, Ottavino's been horrible.
Exactly.
So
outside of really Robertson, it's been nothing.
So you got to keep Robertson. He's your only arm back there. Even no matter how old he is or no matter how much money, you need at least one guy that you can trust for next year. You can't rebuild an entire bullpen in one offseason.
Well, I'm not saying. Look, here's the thing: is that he's a free agent regardless at the end of the season.
It's Steve Cohen. He's got all the money in the world. Who cares about a free agency?
Yeah.
That's not what you worry about as a Met fan. We're not talking like
it's
Renee's
weird,
fan
man.
over
It's
here.
weird. I'm still too used to the Wilpon era Mets. This Mets team, they've just been very underwhelming. It's been very confusing as a Mets fan.
Oh, I 100% agree. But you got to get rid of Carrasco too.
Oh, Carrasco's gone at the end of the season.
Even
regardless.
so, like Marte, like these guys. When I meant don't do deadline moves, I meant don't buy.
Yeah.
Be a seller this deadline. Ditch off all these old guys and try to get some prospects for the future because you don't need guys for next year. You can just sign them. That's the new Mets way. You just got to free up roster spots. That's all you have to do.
And I wouldn't even be bothered if they were to sell Marte. I don't think that's the worst decision in the world because it's not like we can't move McNeil into a corner outfield spot or he could play third base and second base. Like he has played all over the field. So that's the one good thing about McNeil. I don't think we're going to sell him for that specific reason. And that, it's been in the past prior to that contract signing that, the will they, won't they trade him, what's the deal with that. But I think McNeil's going to stay here long term. So, we talked about the Mets and how shitty they are. Now it's time to spin the other side of the coin. There's another team in New York that hasn't been playing up to par. They've been pretty much the definition of mid. And Kyle, I'll let you take it over from here. I know you got a lot to say, so please give me a little something about the Yankees right now, man.
So, typical Yankee fashion in the past couple of years. They start off strong, have a really good first couple weeks of the season. You get really excited, and then the injury bug kicks in, and they go to mid or less than mid. Usually mid, because we usually make the playoffs every year. This is exactly that mid-season where you look at the roster, and you're like, how does this team have 43, 45 wins, whatever we have? And you actually can't figure that part out. But we do have the best bullpen in baseball. That won't change. I hope that doesn't change. We should not be selling that. We should not be buying in the bullpen. Starting pitching has been shaky due to injuries. Rodon comes back, I think they said July 7th. So that's positive news. Cole is obviously pitching good. Schmidt is still young enough, and he's actually been our third best starter of the year.
Oh, so he has been improving because last year he wasn't super great, but I know Clark Schmidt, the guy that's been very young, has a little bit of progression to do, but he's been playing a lot better this year?
Yeah, so last year he was in the bullpen for most of the season. And we started him as a starter starting the season. That was horrible. Moved him to the bullpen. He pitched very good end of the season in the bullpen. This year, due to injuries, he was forced to come back out as a starter, and he had once again, very shaky start, but he's figured it out. I forget what it was, but something with the fastball changeup percentages. He's been throwing one of those pitches more, and it's been really helping him. So we have those three starters. Now Nestor, he's also hurt. I think we got to give Nestor a little bit more time with the pitch clock. They're saying that the way he works, the pitch clock's been throwing him off. That's why that's been like that.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. He was a guy that really did rely on throwing off people's whole idea of when he's throwing that pitch. He used to stand up there with his leg up by his waist, doing all the fake, back and forth, back and forth. Will he throw it now? Will he throw it now? And then all of a sudden, 5 seconds later, he throws the ball. It's a hard thing to keep up with, and that's just really a style of baseball. It's no longer even feasible in today's game with the pitch clock.
Yeah, no, 100%. He's got to get more used to that. Domingo Germán has been mid his whole life, and I think this season we're really starting to see the mid go down. Now, hence, he threw a perfect game, but
hey, man, he can throw a no-hitter, but he can't no-hit his wife. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, that part too. I wanted him gone after he did that to his wife all those years ago. I still, even after the perfect game, it's He played the Oakland A's, the pathetic Oakland A's, and threw a perfect game. That doesn't even count.
He's playing a team that needed to do a reverse boycott just to try to keep the damn team in town because they've been so shit.
Exactly. Like, I don't even count that. Herman needs to go. I mean, he's still got years of arbitration left, but he's got to go. And then the lineup. If we want to talk about the lineup now, the lineup has been quite atrocious, to say the least. We've been winning games 1-0, 2-0. Like, it's been the pitching that's been keeping us alive in these games. We're not hitting. Rizzo had a really good start to the year. He's fallen off ever since that injury from Tatis. That was, not to say the least, but that was a fucked up play by Tatis. You dive back the first. You don't run right into the first baseman.
No.
Volpe, like I said, as of late, he fixed his swing after the chicken parm dinner night. Don't know if you know about that, but
actually, no. Would you like to tell the folks what you're talking about?
Yeah, so he went back down. It was like 2 weeks ago. He had a day off, and he went to meet up with Austin Wells, prospect for the Yankees down in AAA.
Yeah, they're the catcher, right?
The catcher, yes.
Okay.
And Wells says he's been watching the games on live TV, and he realized that Volpe had a swing mechanic that was wrong, and he has got to revert back to his AAA stance. And he did, and now his average has been over 380 for the past 2 weeks. To go off of that, I think that's the most pathetic thing is that if the Yankees hitting coach can't see that he switched something since AAA, and his teammates can, that's a big coaching problem on the Yankees, and same with Boone. But
that is a huge issue.
Once Judge went down, this season was kind of over. And now not knowing that Judge says he hopes to be back this year, that's not good news for the season. We can hold on as much as we want and be mid and get that wild card spot, but I think it's the same thing with the Mets, where this is a retool year. You got a lot of contracts that are going to be ending. You're going to get money back in the offseason, and there's some people that contracts are running out that maybe not this trade deadline, but this offseason, you got to really consider about trading.
No, I definitely agree. And I mean, look, every team is going to be gearing up for probably one of the greatest free agency races in any sport of all time. Everyone's going to be shelling out the biggest dollar value for a player that we've never seen the likes of before since Babe Ruth. This Jesus Christ. This Shohei Ohtani race is going to be a one-of-a-kind free agency battle between teams like the Mets and the Yankees and the Dodgers. And I don't really think the Angels are going to be in it, but still possible.
I think that's where you're wrong. Ohtani's already stated he wants to be on the West Coast so he can fly back to Japan for his family reasons. It's kind of, in my opinion, I think you're right. The Angels were out, but the Angels are doing better than the Yankees. Angels are in a top wild card spot with the Orioles right now.
Are they really?
Yeah.
They're actually playing well this year?
They're playing well this year. I know it's crazy, but I may be wrong, but they're one of the 3 wild card teams right now. I think it's a 3-way race for Ohtani between the Giants, the Dodgers, and the Angels. And I think the Padres and the Mets are going to be used as the team to get his price tag up, and they're just going to get like a ghost offer from those teams just to jack up the price. But,
I mean, I know the Mets are going to offer him $60 million flat up. They're just going to do it, especially if Scherzer's gone next year. If the Mets decide that he's not going to come back and he's just going to retire, I mean, all of a sudden we freed up a little over $80 million in cap space in 1 year.
Said, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't. It doesn't.
It doesn't matter how much you free up. You're going to have unlimited money either way.
That is true, but having an extra $80 million per year to spend, I mean, that makes it so much more realistic. Yeah. Granted, it's going to be interesting, and I don't know what the Mets are going to do. There's a lot of uncertainty in the air.
I really don't think the Mets or the Yankees have a chance because we're on the East Coast, and that's a big thing with Ohtani. He likes to see his family. That plane ride, it has to be horrendous to go from East Coast to Japan.
I mean, it's only, you know what? Yeah, it's another 4 hours, so that does kind of suck. It's a lot. At
least 4 hours.
Traveling.
Yeah. So that's. I don't think we're gonna eat. I think, and looking ahead, I don't think this free agency class besides Ohtani is the greatest. I think it's like
definitely not.
Ohtani top heavy, and then after that, there's good players, but there's not that many.
But here's the thing: I feel like the Yankees are a team that they don't necessarily need a lot of great players. They just need more good players. Like having Judge and Bader in the outfield is perfect. You're going to keep Rizzo as your first baseman. You know, hell, Torres, will he be back? Will he not be back? We'll just assume that he's going to play second base again. But you're telling me a guy like Teoscar Hernandez isn't going to be a big ticket item for both teams in New York? And a corner outfielder that hits for power and is pretty decent as a base runner? I could see it.
Oh, I definitely agree. I think the The problem is, like, you get Donaldson off the books next year. That's $25 million.
That's
a
huge.
top end guy you could get that I don't know if is actually in this class. Like, you'd be able to get 2 guys for the price of one horrendous Donaldson, which is still going to be a huge help.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't think we're going to see the flashy signings that we're going to see. So to go over the Yankees, Rizzo has to stay at first. He gets his job back next year no matter what. Volpe, cheap contract. He definitely stays. I think we really need to re-sign Bader to a longer-term contract. He's like the perfect Yankee. He can take the media. He can take all the pressure. And he's a defensive-minded, fast guy. And the Yankees have not had that since, Brett Gardner, but back in Brett Gardner's like more youthful days. Not
when Brett Gardner could actually hit the baseball a little bit.
He's kind of like the new Brett Gardner of the team, which the Yankees need that.
I agree, and I think Harrison Bader's a very good player for that ball club. I think he just adds a lot of value in that center field position. And defensively, you're right, but I think even offensively, he's just as good as anybody else in that whole team outside of Judge, if not better. I mean, Bader's been a great player for the Yanks. I would actually like to see him back on that team. I think it would be a very exciting spot for him to stay.
I agree. So, and obviously Judge is going to stay. But I think that Trevino, I mean, even though he's not playing great baseball this year, he's not the all-star he was last year, him and Higashioka, it's kind of the Astro strategy where you don't have good catchers that hit. You have good catchers that work with your pitchers and they help your staff. These 2 guys, there's a reason we have the best bullpen. We have guys named Ian Hamilton pitching lights out this year. Like, who is Ian Hamilton? No one knows.
He's probably just as good as Jeff Brigham. He just has a guy who knows how to tell him what fucking pitch to throw.
Exactly. And I'm not nothing against Alvarez. He's still got to learn the defense. Buck has said that. He's got the offense. He's got to learn the defense.
But that's always been an issue with Alvarez. But he'll get there over time, and I'm sure it definitely helps having guys like Scherzer and guys like Verlander in there to be like, hey, if you do this and this, it'll really help you.
But looking at the Astros mold with Maldonado, he has been a automatic out in the order for the past 4 years, and they have won championships, plural. I know one was cheating, but still, they have won championships with Maldonado on that team. Those guys have to stay. I think we give Torres to the end of the year, see if he can break out of the 240, 25 home run that he's been averaging for his career. If he can't, we have an arbitration year. You give him half of next season, we dump him at the deadline, or you dump him after this year. But you got to give it this year to see what we got. Now, we had Donaldson and LeMahieu at third base this year. LeMahieu seems like the foot injury from last year has never healed. I saw a good video that he cannot catch up to the faster pitching, and he's hitting very good against slow pitching this year. But if he's anyone above 95, he can't hit them. I say give him to the end of the year, see if that foot heals, but I think that may be a contract you have to dump after this year if that foot can't heal, because that's $15 million a year for the next 3-4 years. That's a roster spot.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, DJ's been a very good player for the Yankees past years. I want to say the past 4 or 5 years. He's been a very, very solid player for them, but you're right, that foot injury does still look like a nagging injury at this point, and maybe it does get a little better by next year. Maybe it heals up a little bit more, but for an aging player, I think he's like 33, 34. For an aging player, that's tough, especially a guy playing in the infield at the hot corner. I mean, that's tough. If he's having a hard time reacting to fast pitches, I can only imagine how that is in the field when you're getting a 102-mile-an-hour freaking ball ripped right at you down the third baseline.
It's just like any sport. It's a sad situation. He was a great player. No one thought that he was going to digress this fast, but I think that just like any other sport, if there's an injury later in the career, there's sometimes you just got to dump, and sometimes players have to retire. Donaldson, luckily, off the books. We get to save that money. Stanton, he can't play the field anymore. That's been clear. We said before this season we're going to see more in Stanton in the field than ever before. That has not been the case.
Not even close to the case.
You can't even dump Stanton's contract. I don't know what you do with that contract. That is the worst.
You're going to play him at DH and hope to God he just hits fucking home runs. That's it.
But I don't think it's winning baseball to play Stanton at DH anymore. I think you got to figure something out. I don't even know what it is. But at this point, I don't see the Yankees being a winning team if Stanton and the catching spot is on the same lineup together. That's just 2 automatic outs with an occasional home run.
No, that's fair. That's fair. It's going to be very interesting to see how that team moves forward into 2024. So, all that being said, Kyle, you have anything you'd like to add before we kind of start wrapping this bad boy up?
Yeah, just one more thing. With Oswaldo Cabrera, he should definitely be sent down. He needs some more time in the minors. I think he was called up too quickly. He needs a little bit more there. And then the pitching staff, I think the pitching staff should stay the same for this year and next year. I think we get Frankie Montas back, and there's more players that are injured on the Yankees that
would really add a lot of value.
Exactly. It's like we haven't seen the full potential of this Yankees pitching staff, which has already been very good this year because of the injuries. And I think you, just like the Mets, you give it to the end of this year, you see what you got, but I think the off season, I think you shell a lot of this dead weight and you don't give players second chances. Especially in New York, you cannot be giving these players second chances and treating them like babies.
Well, it's not even second chances. It's giving these guys, at least for the Mets, it's giving them third chances, fourth chances, fifth chances.
That's your mistake.
It's getting fucking ridiculous, and it's time to cut ties.
Our mistake is just second chances. Like Donaldson should never have gotten a second chance this year. IKF probably should not have gotten a second chance. I'm happy he is because he's just been a mid player on a mid team helping us win mid games. Like, it's worked out perfectly, but I don't see IKF as a future piece of this team either.
Yeah,
that's all I have to say about the Yankees.
No, that's fair. And look, I'll give one more statement about my Mets team. You know, I wish something that I think would be interesting we didn't really discuss before. Lindor's been hitting a lot better from the right side of the plate than the left, like significantly better. I'm surprised that Buck hasn't just told him, "Hey, you're not hitting from the left side. I don't give a fuck. Go stand on the right side of the box. Go stand in the left box, bat righty every day until you can figure out how to bat lefty again." Because I think at this point we just need a player who can hit the ball. It's not about being a switch hitter. It's just about hitting the ball.
And that's what I was talking about. You need a manager who has the balls to tell a $30 million player that, no, just because you make $30 million does not mean you get to dictate the team.
Exactly.
Like, there's still a manager for a reason. You're just making more than everyone else. If you need to hit from the right side only, then that needs to happen. You're right.
I very much agree. Look, the Mets team, it's not going to change too much by next year, but you know what? There's definitely going to be a lot of shifting, I'd say, in the bullpen and in the starting rotation. I think that'll definitely be very interesting. And, you know, there will be a couple new pieces in the lineup, but I think really more or less it's going to be a lot of pitching work. Now, look, guys, there's still a lot of season left, a lot of baseball to be played. You know, maybe all of a sudden the Mets and the Yankees decide they're going to play the best baseball they've ever played through the rest of July and August and maybe even into September. But I really doubt that at this point. I think we're getting towards the time to show. So, with all that being said, Kyle, you got anything you'd like to say to fans at home? You know what? I like that one. Mets Giants, Peterson versus Ross Stripling. I'm also taking the Mets tonight. So, with all that being said, everybody, I'm going to sign off here. Your favorite idiot, Idiot Zero. My name is Zach. Thank you so much for coming out and listening, and have a phenomenal day.